One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Okay, here's the plan for today. We are going to paint this Crypt Guardian from Reaper Miniatures, and we're doing something a little bit different today. This is the first time we've tried this. We have students in the classroom painting live, as well as people online watching live. If you're watching online, I can't hear you. You have to, on the Discord, I can't hear you. You have to type in the chat, and then I'll answer your questions out loud. Same thing for people watching on Twitch. If you have a question, please, by all means, throw it in the chat, and then I'll become aware of your question. I'll say out loud what your question is and then kind of talk through the answer. Here in the studio with me, I've got my friend Damon, who's going to be painting along. You can't see Damon on screen, but you're going to hear his voice. And Damon's going to ask lots of questions as we go, because that's what helps me get talking. And I know you all love to listen to me talk. So there's also a dog here sitting by my feet. The CEO is here. You'll probably hear her wandering around. And there's going to be customers coming and going because I'm on the store side of the studio today. And fortunately, I've got a good friend back there who's going to run the cash register if anybody buys something. So we got all the bases covered. Don't hesitate to ask questions. If there's any technical problems, please let me know. If you can't hear me, you can't see things, just right away let me know and we'll get it all squared away. So the plan for this Crypt Guardian. In the last few weeks, so the first mini we painted in this series was Rictus the Undying, and we used like a dark color scheme on him. We made it so he looked like he was floating into midair, and we had all kinds of rust, and we used Phantom Glow as kind of the main creepy color. Then last week we painted the Grave Wraith using Rhonda Bender's method from the Reaper Paint Along kit, and that one uses Spectral Glow, but we threw Phantom Glow in instead. And the plan is that we're going to paint this guy, incorporating same dark themes, the same rusty kind of colors on the weapons, and we'll use the same glow effect color, so the three models get tied together in a similar color scheme. So the plan for the day. I've got a whole stack of paints that we're going to use. Here they are. And I'll talk you through kind of the general plan. As usual, my palette is down in the corner. So we are going to start by using... our black for today is going to be Nightshade Purple. So anytime that we're going to do like a dark wash or we're going to try to paint something a very dark color, we'll give it a base of Nightshade Purple. That's going to be our start color. Our next thing we are going to use Aged Bone. That's going to be for all the bone parts on the skeletal figure. We are going to use Reaper's Honed Steel. Mine is very faded. Sorry, I don't know what the number is, but that is Honed Steel. You can use Shadow Steel, any kind of dark colored steel metallic. That's going to be for all the metal parts. We have 9319 Phantom Glow is going to be for the glow effect piece. We have Wolf Gray 9434 is going to be our gray. He's going to have a wolf skin cloak on him. For anything which is like a light tanned color, we're going to use Reaper Tanned Leather, like be for the inside of his cloak and that kind of thing. And then we are also going to use some other colors I haven't used in a while. We are going to use Sepia Wash 9310, and we're going to use this to add kind of a dirty, dingy look to leather and to like the bottom of his cloak and a few other things like that. Make him look really, really grim. And then for rust, I'm going to use this dark red, this mahogany brown 9070 is going to be for the dark elements of rust. And I'm going to use, of course, my favorite rust brown 9072 to do the lighter parts of rust effects. And there's a couple other colors I'll throw in later. We don't need to worry about those right now. And I'm going to use 9144 Creamy Ivory as the brightest highlight color, because that's the same color as I used in the previous two minis. And if you want to check those out, there's also videos for those other figures already posted on YouTube. And as always, you can get this figure from Reaper. The SKU number should be linked for the Bones figure and the metal figure down below in the description. How's that for too much information too fast? And then we start recording again, and here we are. Okay, so we're going to start by putting our, we're going to basically start with the wolf gray on the cloak. So I'm going to add that wolf gray into the palette, and then I pass it over to Day, and he's going to add that into his palette too. We need our honed steel. Honed steel is the next one I'm going to put on, and this is going to be for all the metallic parts. Just joking with Day a few minutes ago. I make the plan for the color scheme depending on my mood, and I didn't really know what mood I was in until dealing with all the technical issues. Now that the technical issues are dealt with, then I choose the color scheme. So it's a gross, grotty, evil color scheme for a gross, grotty, evil mood. That wasn't flown out very well for me. You might need the pin to get enough paint to come out. There's the pin there. And if it's not working, I'll just grab a new one. And if it's working in the miniature store, literally go to the rack, grab a new paint, chuck it on the table, and away we go. Yeah, stop fighting with it. Let's just get a new one on the go. Give that one a good shake up. Just throw the cap on that. Oh, you got. That's not enough. You need more of that. Use the new one. Use the new one. We're gonna need some nightshade purple. Let's get that on the palette right now. There's the nightshade purple, and we're gonna need the aged bone. We'll put that down here.
Oh, wow.
So nightshade purple, aged bone, and then tanned leather, and that'll be all of our base coat colors. There we go. Tanned leather. We'll get to the phantom glow. Actually, no, let's throw the phantom glow on there now. Might as well. We need a big dollop of phantom glow, because we're going to mix this in with just about everything. Okay. Let's grab some brushes. And now it is time to do some base coating. So the first thing we're going to do is take a quick look at the Mini, and we're going to scope out where our metallics are. So in here I'm seeing chainmail. That's going to get the honed steel, the pommel, hilt, and blade of this sword. There's another sword in by his waist. We'll put silver on that as well. Oh, maybe it's a pick or a warhammer or something in there. I don't know. Maybe it's the back of an axe, but that's definitely something metal. It's got a metal belt buckle. The metal rim on this shield should be metallic. The boss of the shield should be metallic, and I think that's going to be enough metallic. We might need to go back and do a few details, but that's where we're going to start. So the reason I'm starting with the metallic, because metallics don't endure well on the wet palette. So the longer I leave that silver paint on there, the more kind of gunky and gooey it's going to get. So I'm just going to start by loading up my brush with that honed steel. And I'm going to start on the pommel of the sword. Give that a quick thin coat of honed steel. Now you don't want to thin these paints with a lot of water. Particularly the metallics. If you do, they tend to fall apart very quickly. If you do need to thin them, use a little bit of, I personally like to use a little bit of flow improver. So I thin it with an acrylic medium rather than thinning it with water. And I find that tends to work a little bit better, specifically with metallic paints. For what we're doing today, you shouldn't need to thin your paints really at all until we go to the part where we're going to do some washes and maybe even some glazes. And when we do that, I'll tell you whether you need to thin things out. So there's the pommel, the hilt, and the sword blade. And now I'm going to do a base coat on his chainmail armor. And at the same time, I'm going to try to get that belt buckle a little bit. Might have to come back and redo the details on the belt buckle. But the idea here is to be a little bit systematic about it. Make sure we get all the metallics with a first coat of paint on them. Do the head of that pickaxe in there. And then we do the edge of the shield. Yeah, so one of the reasons we're doing the classes this way now is I was finding that as I did more and more of the paint-alongs, but without anybody talking to me, I've been painting faster and faster and faster, and I've started doing much more sort of intermediate and more difficult techniques when I really intend these to be a paint-along for beginners to learn foundation skills. So part of the idea by having students live here in the classroom at the same time as streaming out live is it'll slow me down, give me a better sense of what the pace should be. And while people out there watching might not be comfortable asking questions, people here in the studio, who, like folks like Damon, have taken lots of painting classes from me before here in the studio, and hopefully will be comfortable to let me know if I've done something that makes no sense, or to ask questions when I say something confusing. And I don't know. Day usually asks very interesting questions during the class. Right, Day?
I wouldn't say interesting.
I find them interesting.
More like stupid.
No, not at all. Day has an interest in fine arts, and he has very interesting questions. Has interesting ideas. So there we go. There's the metallics done. And the way this usually works in the class is that I'll do that, and then I'll pass the mini around the table. Other people can have a look. I think this is a pretty basic step. You shouldn't need to, hopefully.
Oh, I thought there was metallic on his sleeve.
No, I think it's just leather, is it? Or maybe bone?
I thought it was chainmail.
Okay, let me have another look. Maybe I missed a piece. Which sleeve are you looking at?
Like the one holding the sword? It looks, it could be chainmail.
I think it's a piece of cloth.
Yeah?
Yeah, it looks to me like a piece of cloth.
Did we paint the sword?
It said, yeah, we paint the sword blade as well. I think it's meant to be like a bandage. Or maybe it's fur. The other one looks like fur.
Okay.
One side looks like a bandage. The other side looks like fur.
Yes.
And what does that mean at the end of the day? We can pick. we can make it up ourselves. Paint it however we like.
So you're saying I could potentially make it into...
You could make it chainmail if you want to, totally.
All right.
Okay, so with that done, the next step is I'm going to paint all of the cloak wolf gray. So I'm going to get my brush loaded up. This you might need to thin a little bit to get the gray paint to go down into the kind of the crevices on the fur. And there's a couple of different ways to approach this. One is, you could have the mini painted a very, very dark color and then just dry brush the gray onto it, and that would give you a very dark fur with just a little bit of color. Another approach is the way I'm going to do it. I'm going to paint the fur gray, and then I'm going to use a wash on it to darken it down quite a lot. And it's because I want it to look gungy and rotted and kind of wrecked. And I'm going to put a purple wash on it because the nightshade purple, when you make a very thin watery wash out of it, tends to look a bit oily and kind of grimy, and that's what I'm looking for. So I'm just going to paint the whole cloak wolf gray. Like I said, one approach would be to thin the paint a lot, put 2 thin coats over it quickly. The risk in that at this stage, of course, is that it will take a long time for it to dry if you get too much water in the mix. So we'll just avoid doing that by maybe just painting this on in a single layer. And if you're painting directly over black, this is going to look very patchy, and that's okay. We want it to look kind of messy and gross is what we're going for. And we're just painting the fur part of the cloak, not the inside of the cloak. The inside of the cloak is going to get that tanned leather color. slowly work my way around. As usual, I forgot to tell you, but I do have a light direction in mind for this guy. You can see from his base that it's more shadowed on this side, lighter on this side, so the light's kind of shining in on him, basically straight through his sword blade. So the tip of the sword is going to be lighter, back in here it's going to be darker, in the back side of his legs and around here, this is all going to be darker colors, so that we have a clear sense of which way the light's shining on him, and it's basically shining straight down his sword blade towards him. Just noticed there's a big piece of plastic there that I need to hack off of this guy. I missed it when I was doing the mini prep, which probably means that there's one on days as well. See that piece of plastic at the back right there?
Oh.
Do you have that?
Yeah,
you do that? Yeah,
I
okay.
do see.
I'll get an X-Acto knife so we can cut that out.
So are we doing his boots the same color as well?
His boot, does he have fur on his boot?
Yeah, they're fur.
Okay. Then yes, let's do that.
So we'll put what, as you said, on his cloak, the gray, right?
Yeah.
And on his boots and on his arms, the ones holding a sword and a shield.
If that's the way you want to go, yeah.
Cool.
Come on, I know that there's a palette knife or a hobby knife right here in the over table. Of course, I can't find it. Well, I cleaned up the studio earlier, so now I can't find anything.
It's on pause, right?
Pardon me?
It's on pause?
No, it's fine. I'll just leave it running when I make it big. This is how we roll. When things are going wrong, we just keep going. Hi, Valandar. That link, it may not have worked when I posted it because it hadn't been started yet, but it should be working now. Oh, right on. There's 3 people in the Discord. There's Schwazo. Okay, yeah, and he says it looks like fur to him too. That's fair. Okay. So that's going to be fun to keep track of the Discord chat as well as the Twitch chat.
Yes, I think they should legalize cloning because there's not enough of you to go around.
Well, the other thing we could do is set up another computer, and I make somebody else track the chat. And that was kind of the main thing that was holding me back from doing this, was it's too hard to monitor everything.
Yes, it is actually.
And so I might have to get my good friend over there sit at the table to monitor the chat for me. You're the somebody, yes. Yeah, that's you. Okay.
Yeah, and yes. Or pay you extra for what you get.
Yes, I'll double your pay.
All right.
At this point, my buddy Roger's pay has been like multiplied times about 40 times. But 40 times nothing is still nothing. I figure if I don't make any money, why should he? That's my story. I'm sticking to it. That's the way life goes, man. Oh, this is very cool. We've got people following along on Twitch. There's people in the Discord. And yeah. And just as a reminder for you folks on the Discord, if you want feedback as you're painting along, just go ahead and take a snapshot, chuck it in the Discord, and we can take a look. Okay, so there's the fur coat on the... I did the sleeves, the boots, and I did the arms. Yep. And now I'm going to start working with the tanned leather. The tanned leather color is going to go in a whole lot of places, not just on leather. So the place I'm going to start with it is going to be on the inside of his shield. Okay, the inside of the shield. And this is going to form the base of our very corroded, beat up looking wood that we're going to do. So try not to get it on the metal that you already painted, but it doesn't really matter if you do. Just do one coat on there and kind of work it around a bit. It doesn't matter if it's a little bit patchy. Then I'm going to keep working clockwise around the model. We've got the hilt of this pickaxe looking thing needs this color. And then right in there between the shield and that pickaxe, there's a bit of the tanned leather showing. So that's going to get this color next. Work right down beside his boot. Then there's the fur on the boots, but then right at the bottom, we're going to paint his boots this tanned leather color. And the question would be, well, how do we tell the difference between all these different materials? We're going to put different colored washes on them to be able to tell them apart. Then I'm keep working my way left around his body. So now we're working on the leather cloak in between his legs. And at this stage, it doesn't matter if you're a little bit sloppy. You get a bit of this on the cloth, like his trousers, or on the bone, because we are going to come back and do those colors again. And it's all right if he looks messy and patchy, because, you know, undead guy, hygiene not top of his priority list. So under his armpit, there's a little bit right there between the pommel of his sword and his wrist and his elbow there. It gets painted the same tanned leather. And then we keep working our way around clockwise along beside the side of the leg. Okay, and then his other boot gets this color too. There we go. And the cloak kind of folds up on the ground behind him in there and then comes forward. So that bit there is tanned leather as well. And it's lying on the dungeon floor, getting all dirty. Like I said, this guy is not super concerned about that sort of thing. We just paint around that a little bit. Now, there's one last spot that we need to look at. And that's if we turn him upside down, you should be able to see that there's a little bit of this leather will be showing above his sword arm and his shield arm. Just a little bit of that color shown in there. And we do that under both arms. Now that I've got him upside down, I can see that I've missed the handle of his sword. So let's, you know what, actually we're going to do that a different color. We'll do that red color instead. Okay, so that's everything painted, that coat of tanned leather. Now if you're painting over black, you might want to do a second coat. If you're painting over a zenithal highlight like I am, you probably won't need to do that. But you just judge for yourself. If it's really, really patchy, then, go ahead and do a second coat on it. If it's not too bad, then, surprise, surprise, don't worry about it.
Yeah, mine's black.
Oh yeah, that'll be what it is. If you're not a member of the Patreon, then you won't be able to get into that channel. No, that's not true. Liz set up the channel, Valandar, so that you should be able to get in there. Let me see if I can open that a different way. Let's go back into there. Come on. I know you're there. Okay, let's go back into that. And let's invite people. Copy the link. That's interesting. It gave me a different link this time. And let's throw that back up into the chat. Okay. Let's try that link. Hopefully that link will get you there. All right. So the next thing is going to be, well, let's do some bone. I'm going to start with the aged bone, and I'm going to put a base coat of that on his hands, his skull, and his legs to make them a sort of a bony color. So we'll give him a little base coat, this aged bone color. And again, this guy is meant to look grotesque. So if he looks kind of patchy, that is all good. So his two hands, the bony parts of his legs, I don't know if you guys can hear that, but the dog is snoring by my feet.
I didn't notice.
You didn't hear it? No?
I'm not
Okay.
here in the
Yeah.
same room.
There we go. So hands, knees, and now we're going to do his skull. That's pretty grimy looking. I like it. All right, now. Oh, Valandar made it in. Brilliant. I'm going to add the red color that I was talking about onto the palette. I haven't added that on yet, so I'm just using this mahogany red, but you could use like deep red or brick red, pretty much any really dark red paint. That mahogany red is totally dried up, so I'm going to go grab a different one. Deep red. Deep red 9002 from Reaper. With any of these things, though, any of these painting classes, you don't have to use the same color. Use whatever colors you've got laying around. Just try to look for something which is a similar color. Let's try that again on the palette. Oh, finally starting to come out. There we go. There you go, Dave.
Thank you.
All right. I need to open the chat room again. The chat room closed on me. Let's open it again. There it is. Lost the video feed. Thank you. There it is. It's back. Something happened there. We got disconnected. But I think we're back. Let me just make sure it's working on the Twitch again. Twitch, are we still alive? We are. Right on. Yeah, Reaper's got great reds. I love them. Brick red is one of my favorites too. Lots of great colors there. All right. And we're going to use this red.
Phoenix Fire is also a good color.
Phoenix red is a great one. I love that too. So what are we going to paint this color? So we're going to paint his pants. And then pretty much there's a few other details we haven't painted yet. These are going to get the same sort of dark red color. So that will include like some leather straps, the hilt of a sword, a few little things like that. This dark red is going to be sort of like a leather color for us on this model. There we go. Don't worry about it too much if you make a few mistakes at this stage and you get little bits of red where you don't intend them to be, because the next thing we're going to do is put that gross nightshade purple wash over everything, and It's intended to make things really gross and messy. So if you've got a few little mistakes, not going to be a problem. He's also got the strap of his shield in his hand. We'll paint that red. His belt, painted that red. We'll paint the belt across his chest red as well. I probably shouldn't be using like a beat up old size 3 synthetic brush to do this, but it's just what I happened to have in my hand, so I kept going. There we go. And then on his shirt, there's a few things that we're going to paint this red color. So there's like these little straps of red that go alongside of the chainmail. And then the sleeves of his shirt up to, but not including the fur bits. There we go. I'm going to switch to a smaller brush here in a minute, but for now this is working. Okay, and then the next part is the sword hilt. Yeah, that's a detail I probably should be painting with a smaller brush. Do you think that brush might be a bit big for the job? Probably. And as usual, I say things like that, then keep using the same tool I've been using all along. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. I got lots of good little mistakes in there that I'm going to fix later. They're going to add a bit of... I'm going to claim that they add visual interest. And you can tell your friends whatever you would like to tell them. I'm going to paint this part of his shield, the surface of his shield, the same red. Just going to leave the border in that silver that we did earlier, the honed steel. It's not very well marked out on the front of the shield. We're going to treat it like it's the edge. And we're going to treat this like it's a leather surface or something like that over the shield. Where's there a wood grain on that? Now that I'm painting it, I'm starting to see a wood grain. So we're going to pretend that this is just stained red, stained with like wood stain or something. It's not going to matter because we are going to weather the heck out of it in a little while. There we go. So all the critical elements have one coat of paint on them. That's where we needed to get to. And now we are going to start doing some washes. How are you making it out over there, Day?
I'm gonna well, while I was painting the bone white,
Yep.
I'm gonna have to go back over where I did the tanned leather because it's in black, as you pointed out earlier.
Oh, so you need a second coat of that on there?
Yeah.
Okay. Go right ahead and do that. I'll just keep going along a little bit. So I'll do the same thing. I'll do a second coat on the inside of the shield and the inside of the cloak. You need to do a second coat on.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Do that. So I'm going to do the inside of the shield. Just kind of work it in. And the same thing again. Basically everywhere that we did tan leather before. Especially if you're painting directly over black, do a second coat. And the mini I gave Day is just airbrushed on primer, black primer straight over the bones. It's not primer, let me rephrase that. It's just black paint painted straight onto the bones. As a first coat, it is not really a primer coat. It's just to make it dark colored. All right, there we go. I'm sort of messing around now. I should stop doing that. I'm just kind of fussing and putting little dabs of color here and there to create stains and that sort of thing. Well, that's interesting. There's a little tiny bit of his, the belt that goes across his chest protrudes from underneath his cloak at the top. Right up there. So we'll paint that red as well, right there. There, I finally switched to a smaller brush. And not an hour too late.
I think I'm going to have to put on the third coat for this, Mr. Geoff.
I don't think you probably will, because we're going to do a wash over it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we're going to dab on some patchy tan leather on top of the wash. Can I have a look at where you're at?
Yes. Second coat. I'll still just finish the second coat on the inside, interior coat.
Oh no, that's going to be fine. Just leave it.
Yeah.
Do the shield again, though.
Yes.
And then need to get on with the red.
Okay.
Here, did you want to take a look at that?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Ooh.
So, but it doesn't need to be really precise, okay? And mine's a lot lighter than yours because of the zenithal highlight I started with. Do you mind if I put yours on the camera?
Yep.
So yes, I can, or no, I can't.
Yes,
Okay.
you can.
So yeah, this is what it looks like over the black. You can see what Dave's talking about in here, how patchy that is. And he's doing a second coat in here on the tan leather. And I think that's cool. Do the tan leather again. But just leave the wood,
Okay.
because we're now going to do a very dark wash over all of this to darken it all up again. And yours is going to end up looking much darker and grittier than mine does as a result.
Okay, so leave the shield as is.
I would leave the shield as it is, but keep
Okay, sure.
keep working on that that leather, and then do the red.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So that is all coming along okay. I'm going to put just a little bit more silver where I made a mistake in there. Boom. Cover that over. There. Okay. Let's check in and see how everybody out there is doing. Let's see. We got a half a dozen people watching on the on Twitch. Let's check in with everybody on the Discord. So I forgot to record a little bit there. All we've done is gone around and done a wash of Nightshade Purple over most of the model. And we're focused right now on working it in on the cloak. That's just for anybody who's watching this video 20 years from now who's like, what the heck just happened? They jumped from an unwashed model to a washed one in 1 second. That's my fault. Okay. What I need in here is like a video technician who just controls all the recording and controls all that stuff, and I just do a cameo as a painter and show up. Let them do all the hard work. What do you think, Catherine? Is that fair? Make you do all the hard work and I'll just wander in and wander away?
Yes, we need a total film crew.
Yep. Coffee stains with bad washes. Exactly what I'm looking for. I want that effect to make this guy look as gungy as possible. Yep. Good and gungy. Quite happy with that, actually. So now we have to wait for that to dry. And because there was a lot of water in that, it could take a few moments to dry. So while I'm waiting for that to dry, I'm going to mess around a little bit. I'm going to put some black on my palette. A bit of dragon black. This is your dragon black day. And I'm going to put a little bit of stone gray on my palette.
I like dragon black.
Dragon black is a great color. And there's your stone gray.
Thank you.
And what I'm going to do is I'm going to dab some stone gray onto my base. Mine has some tiles sculpted on there. The ones I did up for the class just have like dirt on them. I'm going to put little dabs of gray over the stones. And I'm just doing this while I'm waiting for to give the wash a bit of a chance to dry. So just dabbing that on there. Now, why did Geoff put dragon black on the palette, you might be asking yourself. Because another thing I can do while I'm waiting is I can paint the rim black. So while I'm waiting for that wash to dry, I'm just going to put a little bit of black paint around the rim of the base.
Around your shield there, did you also have the steel?
I did, but you don't have to.
Okay.
Like I just kind of ad hoc added that in there.
Oh, I like it. I'll do that.
Okay. So I'm going to paint the base black. And if you're just messing around, this is something you can do, but I'm also going to be dry brushing the stones a bit later on, and I'm going to mess up all this black. This is just to kind of buy time to allow that purple wash to dry a bit. And for those of you out there who are saying to yourself, well, I don't paint the rim of my bases black. I say unto thee, paint the rim of your bases black. And give them a little bit of detailing so your model looks finished. I see it all the time now, actually. It's always been that way. People get to a certain stage in their mini painting career where they're focused on learning to paint, and they don't bother with adding the details on their bases. They don't really think about it until somebody says, hey, your bases need some detail. I was guilty of that. I used to post stuff on the Reaper forums all the time, and I was starting to get to be I was starting to get better at my painting anyway. And then somebody friendly was like, I would look really good with a finished base on it. I'm like, well, what do you mean? He says, well, put some effort in. Finish the base. And ever since, I've been buying bag after bag of green stuff and finishing the bases properly, or at least putting some sand on there. Just kind of, usually what I do is use a bit of green stuff to continue whatever texture the original sculptor put on there, and just kind of extend it out further onto the base. That's what I've done on this guy anyway. And there, I just threw the purple wash over the stones as well. How much more time do I need to waste? Let's take a look. Well, I can see that most of this is dry, but right in here in the red, this is not dry yet. In here is not dry yet. The cloak is actually looking really good. It's still not quite dry in there. Definitely not dry down there, but it's getting there. This is doing all right. So the bone is all looking pretty dry. The metal is all looking pretty good. But what I really need to start working on a little bit next is going to be this tanned leather areas, the wood, and the fur. So those are the things I need to be dry before I can keep going. So let's start. I really want to start with tanned leather, so that's what we're going to do. I'm going to grab that tanned leather color now. No, I need to switch back to the smaller brush I was using.
May I take a look at your model?
Absolutely. As long as I can take a look at yours.
Yes. And
Cool.
feel free to show it up on the screen even with the black.
There I
Also,
go.
we did the purple. Why'd you do the purple?
Right on.
Nice shade.
Oh yeah, the cloak looks totally different with the black underneath.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to look
Gives
good
it
with the
depth.
wash. It really does. It does. I like it.
So do I. I love the cloak, but I was thinking, hey, that looks really good. I like yours. Yours looks nice and deady.
Right on. That's what we're looking for. We're aiming to look dead. The deader, the better. So in terms of the purple wash, just put it over everything.
Okay.
Like, because it kind of ties everything together then.
Okay.
And we're going to start bringing the details back out when we start doing a little bit of highlighting with some other colors. So, yes, tan. Next thing I need to add at my palette is going to be a bit of creamy ivory. We're going to need quite a bit of that, so I'll throw some of that in my palette. There's some creamy ivory for you, Dave, right there. And what I'm going to do, there's my little daub of tan leather. I'm going to put just a tiny bit of creamy ivory into that, just lighten it up a little bit. We don't need to lighten it very much because we darkened it quite a lot with the purple wash. So this is going to be for the leather. That's what this is for. We're going to use a different color to do the wood bits. So I got my brush loaded up with that mixture, not too heavy. And now I'm going to be thinking about the light direction. My light is coming this way. Look at that, I messed up my base already. So just remember that as we're going along now, we want to keep these highlights on the lit side and don't do them on the shadow side unless I tell you what time to bring the shadow side up. So the light coming in this way, it's going to come across there. It's just going to catch the top of that bit of the cloak inside there. So we can just bring that up a little bit. Now I'm using quite a nice sable brush with a good point on it, so I can hit these details pretty well. If you're feeling like it's hard to hit the details, don't worry about it. Just kind of highlight the zone a little bit to bring the shapes back. In the zone in between his legs here, you can see that the leather has quite a lot of torn holes in it. So I'm just going to kind of dab little highlights of this color on the edges of all those shapes to bring out the tears and the rips, make them a little bit more visible. And I know that later we're going to add some sepia wash over that, and that's going to make it look stained. So don't worry if it's not perfectly smooth or if the highlights look a little bit varied, because we're going to unify it again with a wash, with that sepia wash. So as you look at this chunk of leather in between his legs right here, okay, I want the back side of it to stay dark. I want to focus on the side where the light's going to catch it this way. So I'm just going to dab those colors on. Small dabs of paint. It's similar to when we were doing the unicorn, but I'm less concerned about really defining the shapes fully the way I was when we did the stipple effect on the unicorn. For this one, it can be quite irregular. I want it to look ragged. So I'm just catching the ragged edges of things that point towards the light. Like that, and that sort of brings it shape out again. And we'll do the same thing on the bit of leather under his arm.
Should I have the purple on the skull as well?
Yep, everything. Cover everything.
Even the sword?
Yeah, even the sword. Because essentially, purple is our black for this figure. So anything you would normally want to like darken down with a black wash, we're using the nightshade purple. Because of the horrible way that it dries, it makes patchiness, it makes things look really ragged and gross, and that's what we're looking for.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know if you can see that on the screen, but like right in there is an example of exactly what I'm talking about. See that coffee staining effect right in there? That's what I wanted. I want it to dry in that patchy, irregular look. And then when I stipple these little highlights over the top of it to bring the shape back out, that bit of irregularity makes it look even more irregular and ragged and decayed and beat up. And that's what I wanted.
Yeah, even on the sword it looks kind of
patchy
nice.
and gross, yeah. Yep, that's what I was looking for. And there's a little bit underneath on the ground. We'll do the edge of that as well. Bring that up a little bit. Okay. That's good. And now for the wood on the shield. Instead of doing the same thing with the tanned leather, I'm going to use the aged bone. I'm going to move the aged bone off to the side. I'm going to add a little bit of tanned leather into that. So it's a similar but not identical color. And then I'm going to put a little bit of creamy ivory into it. So now I've got a slightly lighter color, which is not quite the same color as what I just did on the leather. And I'm just going to do the same thing again. I'm going to do little patchy highlights on the edges of the wooden bits to bring the shapes back out. So you can see all the wood texture in there. Just kind of draw little lines. Just catching the wood. Just make the boards look separate. going to focus more out towards the front of the shield where the light would catch it a bit more. Just like that. Now, if you had a really nice small dry brush, you could dry brush across that texture, but you would run the risk that the dry brush is going to push the color in and hide the texture. It's better to do it with a sharp pointed brush and just paint little streaks and lines. And this is a good thing to do for practice, to be sort of precise about how you paint. Gets you used to the idea of only having the paint land where you want it to. So that's what we did. Just streaky marks on there. You can see that that is a different color now than the leather, even though it's made from the same color foundation. How's that wash worked out for you, Dave?
Let's take a look. Tell me.
Oh, right on. Yep. Love it. Gross and patchy. It's exactly what we wanted. Good stuff. Excellent. Okay, so are you with me with how to do the tanned leather bit now? Because I think that's your next step now. It's a tanned leather, right?
Yeah, the next step is my tanned leather.
So you're just going to grab a bit of that tanned leather off to the side and then put a little bit of the creamy ivory into it to make a mix.
Okay.
And that's what you're going to highlight the various pieces of leather with. While Dave's doing that, I am going to take a sip of coffee.
May I see your mini, please? Thank you. Very nice.
So what do you see in there, Dave?
Okay, I see where you put it on the skull.
Okay, I haven't done the skull yet.
You haven't?
The only things I've done so far is the leather interior of his cloak and the inside of the shield. That's the only thing I've done any highlighting on yet. It may just be that the skull, I was quite light with the wash on the skull, so the shapes look pretty sharp still. But we are going to highlight the skull with the
bone one.
The bone colors, yeah.
Very good. I like the way you did the hands too. Give it a nice deathly color. That looks muted. Right?
Yeah, I think that's a little bit of the black, because that's one of the things that Zenithal Highlight did for me. It really did make those shapes pop out quite a bit more. All right. Next step is going to be dry brushing. We are going to dry brush the wolf fur now. So what I need to find is, there we go. I'm going to use this dry brush, same one as I was using last week. This is one of the new Army Painter Masterclass dry brushes. They're not bad. They're a little bit more affordable. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to grab my gray paint there. This is the wolf gray that we used on the cloak earlier. And I'm just going to work it into the bristles of the brush right here on the wet palette. I don't want a lot of paint on the brush. But now if I take that and I go and just wipe it all off on the paper towel, it dries the paint out a lot. So what you want to do is, if you need to, you can just wipe a little bit on your hand if you get too much paint on there. But you do need the paint to still be wet on the brush. Just don't want to have it so overloaded that it just fills in all the stuff that you already did. So when we go to do the dry brushing, here I'll do it on my scar on my thumb there. Scar is almost invisible at the moment. You'll see it in a second. And I'm just going to gently dry brush on my hand until I get a sense of how well the paint's gonna dry brush today. And the conditions are always going to be different, right? There's no exact formula. So I like to just test a little bit before. But there you can see the scar is right there on the thumb now. It's visible, right there. Okay, so now when we go to do this on the fur on the cloak, okay, so yeah, so grab the wolf gray, which was the first paint we put down. Yeah. And your dry brush is totally dry right now, right?
No, actually, I just...
You dipped in the water? Okay, so before you load it up, dry it off on the paper towel so that it's not just soaking wet. You can have a little tiny bit of water in there, but if you have too much, no.
Okay.
So that's far too wet now. Okay, so watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to tip the tip in my water, and watch what happens on the palm of my hand now. Look what's happening on the screen.
Yeah, I see.
You see that's way too much water. So it's okay if the brush is like just the faintest bit damp.
Yeah, it's damp. It's damp
But
now.
if there's, you got to remember how the water works. The water pushes the paint out.
Mm-hmm.
So now what we want to do, get that little bit of paint in the tip of the brush, work it in on the wet palette,
Okay.
and then test it on your hand before you put it on the Mini. And you'll be able to see whether it's going to be too thick or it'll go on. Okay, so that is working pretty well for both of us, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, it is.
And when you go to do this on the Mini now, it has a much bigger effect on the figure. So you want to be really gentle. Now we're going to start over his right shoulder, and we're going to go, so the light is on this side. So we're going to go from the light side to the dark side only. And just very gentle brush strokes until we see how it looks. Okay, that's just building up slowly, and that's exactly what I wanted. And in my mind, he's very gray and dusty and gross, so it's okay if a little bit of this color flops over and hits other areas. But what I'm not doing in this case is doing circular motion. I'm not doing like dry brushing from all directions. I want to primarily hit the direction that he's lit from, which means from his top right shoulder and working my way down. So I can start up here, but I'm still starting at the top and only working my way down. And that's going to exaggerate the effect of that purple wash that we put on. And it's going to make him look a little bit more dramatic. Just gently, and just working from light towards shadow. Okay, and we're going to use one lighter color as well in a minute. We're going to mix in a little bit of creamy ivory into this mix. How's that working out for you?
I can't tell the difference.
It builds up very slow. Turn it around so I can see it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, that's working beautifully. It's coming up really well. You can really see the shape starting to come back now. Okay, like so down there you haven't done anything yet.
No.
You compare that to up here where the shapes are starting to come back. So you're on the right track. Just keep going very lightly, and it'll slowly build the color up.
Okay, thank you.
That's one of the things about dry brushing is we often have a tendency to sort of rush it a little bit. And as soon as you start to rush it, you lose it starts to look powdery. It starts to look kind of streaky. And, you can spend a lot of money on dry brushes. You can buy the best products. And actually, some of those videos that like Artist Opus makes, they're really, really informative. They're really, really good. And I think one of the key things that I took away from watching all of those was just take your time, think about how the paint behaves, and just be patient and enjoy watching the shapes get brought out. And that's one of the reasons I'm using these Army Painter ones. I've used the Artist Opus ones, and they're wonderful. But these ones are certainly more affordable for somebody who's just starting out. And not everybody likes dry brushing. I personally don't dry brush on my own models really very often at all. And, I wouldn't invest a lot of money in expensive dry brushes unless it's something you're going to do quite a lot. So I just added a little tiny touch of creamy ivory into that mix on my palette just to lighten the wolf gray a little bit. And then I'm going to go back and do it again. The same very light dry brushing. Starting on the lit side and working my way down towards shadow. And we want to do that on his arms, on the fur on his legs, Can do this on the arm by the shield. And it's not really going to show up too much on that wood. If it does, makes them look grimy. A little bit on the front of the fur on the cloak. And again, I'm just going to say it again. It's okay if this guy looks really, really grimy and gross. It's going to make him fit right in with the other two undead guys. I'm pretty happy with that. That's coming along all right.
Do you need to refresh this at all, or just...
No. Shouldn't need to do anything to it.
Just checking.
Oh yeah. I'm liking this. This is good.
Yeah, have you added the creamy ivory into it now?
Oh,
Makes a big
yes.
difference, eh?
Oh, it does a touch.
Yep. Just needs that little bit of extra light color to start bringing the shapes out. And if you discover you've put on too much, I mean, there's an easy solution, right? What would you do if it had all become like too kind of light colored and one color from where you were dry brushing too much?
Go back to the color used beforehand.
You could dry brush that darker gray back over it, darken it up again, and you can always go back to the purple wash and do the purple wash over it again. And in fact, when you repeat the process, it just looks cleaner and cleaner. Yeah. But we don't want him to look clean. We don't want him to look dirty. So I'm not going to do that right now. I'm pretty happy with that. Okay. So I'm going to clean my dry brush off. All you do to clean off the dry brush, just wet the tip and then wipe it. Just wipe it on your paper towel until no more paint comes out of it. That's all you need to do. You don't really want to like soak it completely in the water. Otherwise, the paint just goes all the way up the... Yeah. You can pretty much dry brush with any paint, but all the paints from the different companies behave slightly differently. Even paints from within the same company behave differently. So I find it's always worth just testing a bit to see how paints behave before, really committing to putting a particular paint on your model. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do, let's do the bone just for fun. So I've got my aged bone here that we put the purple over. And right off the bat, I'm going to add a little bit of ivory into that. Just lighten it up a little bit. And let's start on this knee over here. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to focus on the side of the knee, which is towards the light. So it's got a little bit of a round bone shape there. We're going to give that a little round highlight. The little kneecap has a little round highlight shape. This piece of bone, I'm not sure what that is. Like it could be a piece of skin or who knows what. Going to give that little highlight. Just kind of slowly work my way down this kind of shredded leg that he's got going on. You could probably put some skin on that. Give it some skin color if you felt like it. I'm just going to do it as bone today. So do the same thing on his right leg, left from our perspective. Just pick out the edges of those shapes and the center of the shapes with this lighter color to make them more visible. Okay. There we go. Now that leg bone is more visible. The hands on this guy are really small. And if you think about, they're going to be composed of like individual finger joints and wrist joints and that kind of stuff, which are very small bones. So we just want to do little dots of color to make those shapes more visible. You could always like just paint long straight lines, but it doesn't look very bony when you do that. So I like to just put dots of color and leave the joints between those knuckle bones dark. And then it looks more bony. So just little dots to separate the bones out a little bit. And we'll do the same thing on his left arm. So there's his thumb. So I'll do a bone that way, and there's the thumb joint. And it comes over the top. That's a part of the bone of his hand. And then we've got all these finger bones. Okay. And now we're going to do the skull. And on the skull, I'm going to start basically around his temple. I want to make sure his eyes are well picked out. So I'm going to leave the sockets dark, but I'm going to look for the brow, that bony brow above the eye, and I'm going to give that a little highlight first because I really want the eyes to stand out, and I'll do that over both of his eyes, but I'm focused on the side of the bone close to the light source. So let's look at this cheekbone right here. There's like his high cheekbone. I'm just going to put the highlight on it pointing directly towards the light, not on the whole thing. Same thing down here on this side, this cheek. The light's going to come across and it's going to catch right on the top, but I'm not going to go all the way around to the back of the bone to highlight that. Same thing a little bit on the top of that jaw, his mandible, and then we'll work our way around and do his teeth. If you can, try to pick out the teeth individually. I know that's a bit of a stretch, but it's worth that practice. And then we'll do the same thing on the top. We'll pick out the teeth individually on the side of them pointing towards the light. Got that little bit of bone showing in his nasal cavity. Give that a little bit of color. And the side of the bone facing towards the light, but we'll leave the other side dark. And then I'm going to work along his jawline. So now I'm looking on the left side of the jaw, which would be his right side. There's the top of the mandible. I'm going to work down along the edge of it like that. And then just below the teeth, I'm going to bring out a highlight on the chin, but I'm going to leave the opposite side dark. So this is just focused on the light side of the model. There we go. And then I'm going to work my way up over the crown. So there's his temple. So I'm going to do the side of the crown facing towards the light, just little dabs of color to make it more visible. And my brush is totally dried out. How are you making out, Day?
I'm doing.
Are you with me working on the bone?
I'm working on the bone.
Okay, right on. So we'll do little dabs of color, little dabs, just kind of focusing on the lit side of the model to bring up the shapes. And we want this to be irregular if possible, right? Like if you make it really, really smooth, it looks like maybe like polished bone. And I want this guy, I mean, everybody can do theirs their own way, but I would like to make mine look like he's kind of beat up, rotted. And that's where this glow color is going to come in a few minutes. We're going to start putting that. We're going to use it basically like as a rotting color to add in. Okay, so that bone looks pretty good to me. I'm quite happy with that. But where the face is like the main feature, I'm going to actually do another level of highlight. I'm going to add more creamy ivory to that aged bone color. And I'm going to do those same highlights on his face again, just a little bit smaller and with the lighter paint. And that's going to bring them out even more, make them more visible. And this is good practice to get used to. Some people are going to be looking at this thinking, Geoff's making this too light. And that's maybe true. But how do you know if it's too light if you've never gone too far? So it's worth getting used to making things really, really light in your highlights, because then you can also practice darkening them down again when you go too far. And at the end of the day, you'll discover, you know, I made that really light and it looks really good. What would happen if you go even lighter? Well, you discover that it looks really good. And the next time you go even lighter, and you're like, you know, that looks really, really strong and punchy and pops. And you make it even lighter, and you discover that what you thought was really light when you started out was actually really dark. And if you want things to really pop on the table, it's all about contrast. And you can't get basic value contrast, light versus dark contrast, without actually painting things light colored. So that's what we do. I tend to force people to paint things really light colored in the classes to get used to that. Right, Day? We always go too far and then discover it wasn't far enough. All right. So that I'm pretty happy with that bone. He's looking pretty good to me now. I'm quite happy with that. So now,
mine look?
Well, let's take a look. Let's take a look. Here's mine if you want to have a glance.
Yes, please.
Oh, right on. I like it.
Whoa.
I like it. He's
Whoa,
really starting to
yours
come
is
in.
Brilliant. Now that is skull right there.
I like it, man. This is looking really good.
Really?
Yeah, I like it.
Thank you.
You get your
Yours is-
fingers well defined. I love the way you kept his eye sockets really dark. You can see where you tried to pick out his teeth. You're on the right track, man. I've been saying that for a while. You just need to paint more.
Thank you.
I would go one level lighter. I would almost go straight ivory
Yeah.
and put a few daubs of straight ivory. Like if we look at his leg right. Oops, I got brown paint on my brush. I won't do that.
Oh yeah.
I'm going to do that right on the edge of his leg with this ivory color now. Okay.
Thank you.
If you just watch the screen for a sec,
Yeah,
you'll see exactly what I do. Okay. So right now you can't really make out the shapes in that knee.
No, I can't.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now I look for the end of the main thigh bone.
Yeah.
Right, the femur. It comes down and it's got a round shape that way and a round shape that way.
Mhm.
So I'm going to pick that out right there and connect it. That's the little bit of the ball of the joint. That's the main body of his femur right there.
Right.
And connect it on the other side.
Oh yeah.
And then the bone keeps up that way.
Yes.
And then there's the patella right there.
Oh,
Okay, so
nice.
by picking those out separately, now the shapes are more visible. And now you look back at that again, you'll be able to see that that's a bony knee, right?
Right.
So for yours, that's what I would do. I would just keep going a little bit further
Yeah, much
and just
better.
kind of pick out the shapes a little bit. Do you need a better brush? Is that brush working for you? Do you need a better brush than that?
No, this is fine. Actually, this is wow. Thank you. That's even better.
Right
Thank
on.
you.
Okay, so let's keep going. What was I do? Leather. No. Yes, red leather. Time to do red leather. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a bit of the red. That's what I was doing. There's the red, and I need to add some of the tanned leather into the red to get a lighter color. And I want to desaturate that red a little bit, make it look kind of weathered and pale. And I'm going to also add a tiny bit of phantom glow into it. Why? Because the blue phantom glow into the red is going to desaturate and give me this weird looking purpley color that I really like. So there it is. I've added a bit of phantom glow into that mix and a little bit of tanned leather, and it's giving me this weird reddish purple pale color. And I'm going to dab and dash and dot that onto the leather, though to the red leather, the same way I was just doing on the tanned leather. We're just doing it with a different color to separate the different colors leather. So I'm going to start on the hilt. The hilt has those little rings on it. So I'm going to try to highlight the individual rings differently. But if your brush doesn't have a very good point, you might just highlight the whole thing one color. Nothing wrong with that. So pick up the rings differently. And then I'm going to work my way up under his arm. I can see that this shirt has like some little frills on it. And I'm going to put little dabs of this lighter color on there to pick out the edges of those little frilly shapes. And I don't want to make nice smooth highlights. I want it to be like little dots and dashes so that it has like a beat up looking leathery texture. And I'm focusing on the side of it towards the light. And I know a lot of people that I've talked about painting classes say, well, a beginner, it's too early to be thinking about lighting. And I disagree with that. I think if you start thinking about the light direction right from the start, then it becomes second nature, and you're always thinking about it as you go forward, and it's going to have a positive influence on your painting. And that's why I like this this technique everybody's talking about all the time now, the what is it called? Slap chop. That's what everybody's calling it, slap chop. Because the core idea in slap chop is that there is light and dark. Slap chop. Slap chop means basically dry brush the model with a light color when it's painted black, and then paint thin colors of paint over the... So it's a value sketch from dark to light by dry brushing, and then you paint thin paints over so the value sketch shows through. But the core concept is still that the light illuminates some areas lighter than others, and that's a good idea to have in your mind right at the get-go when you're painting. So I kind of like that idea.
Is it something like? Is it kind of like similar to, like the way how Boris Vallejo did his paintings?
Uh, I would say no, in the sense that I don't think he would have used that exact technique. But yes, in the sense that he paints with a lot of contrast. In fact, you could, it's grisaille, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's painting light and dark first and then covering it with lighter colors.
Okay.
So it's exactly that technique, just with a method that a beginner painter can use efficiently. And I think it's a good gateway drug to painting light schemes and object source lighting and all those things. So I think it's a good idea. Anything that gets people excited about painting and trying something, but also sneakily adds the foundation of a more advanced idea in it, I think that's good. I like that idea. So I'm just dabbing this sort of revolting, washed out leather color on all the edges and shapes to bring out the shapes. What I'm not doing with this color is just painting stripes of it. I want it to be patchy. I want it to look battered. I want it to look like it's been in a tomb, in a crypt for a long time. And so patchy is the name of the game. All right, so it's looking pretty patchy. I think the exposure on my camera might be a bit high. No, it's all right. There we go. That's where we're at. Okay, so now I want to do that same color on the back on the shield. Now, I'd been hoping that little bit of a wash would bring out the wooden texture on that shield a little bit more, but it really hasn't. And I'm wondering if a really light dry brush might bring those shapes out. So I'm going to try it. Nothing wrong with doing experiments. I'm going to put a little bit, just a touch of that red paint on this dry brush. Finger, okay, not much red showing up. The paint is barely showing up on my finger. So now I'm going to do that on the shield. And on the shield I am going to do like dry brushing from all different directions until I can maybe pick out the texture a little bit. Okay, and that didn't really, the texture is too light to easily pick out with a dry brush. So we have a couple of options there. One is to keep going, keep dry brushing until maybe it just sort of starts to appear a little bit. I could dry brush with a slightly lighter color. But I think what I want to do instead, because that would be, it's going to be a challenge to use a dry brush to make that work. What I'm going to do instead, I'm going to make some more red. Add the blue back in. Add some more tan. So I'm just making a new mix of that same color I was just working with. Like a little bit further. There we go. Okay, just made another volume of paint to work with. I think I'm just going to pick out the shapes manually. So there's some very deep scratches in the armor. And I'm just going to catch the edges of them with the tip of this brush to try to pick out the shapes a little bit. I can just kind of make out the shapes that the dry brushing was picking up a little bit, but they're really, really light textures. So I'm just going to keep the big scratches, but then I'm going to fake it and put my own texture on there.
What did you use? What did you use for your scratches on the shield again?
So I mixed the deep red. I added a little bit of the spectral blue or the phantom glow blue, and a little bit of the tan to it to lighten it. Desaturate it and lighten it at the same time. So I'm just going to put little dashes and marks of it. Create sort of my own beat up texture on there. I think it's meant to be like a piece of leather over wood, but I can't really tell for sure. Probably because I'm not under my good lights. I'm just sitting out in the middle of the studio. Can't really see too clearly. There, it's starting to look kind of battered, and that's really what I wanted to do, just kind of make it look quite beat up. So just dabs and dash marks on there. But just remember that this is the shadow side, so we don't want to go too light. We do want to pick out the shapes a little bit. Okay, so I just add a little bit more creamy ivory in there to lighten a little bit further. And just the top edge of the cuts and things which are closest to the top of the shield, just going to give them that little bit of extra to make them really kind of pop out a bit better. There, so now the shield's looking pretty battered, and that's what I wanted. Okay, and I'm going to do that same light color. I'm going to even more creamy ivory to that. Need to add a little bit of water. It's drying out on me here. There we go. And I'm going to keep going. I'm going to do another coat of highlighting, just picking out details again, just little dabs and dots, picking out the shapes and details in the leather. So like that belt across his chest has little holes in it. I'm going to highlight the side of the holes where the light would catch them, make them a little bit more visible. Same thing on this little bit of the belt down here, the end of the belt, the shield strap, under his arm, just anywhere that the light would have access to make them look a little bit lighter. Put a few more dabs and marks on them so it looks like the light's catching them.
And this is with the tan
this is the same red mix you were just using. I just added a little bit more creamy ivory to it to lighten it up a little bit further, just to add a little bit more contrast to it.
Oh, okay.
So I'm just putting little dabs and dashes and scratches and marks on it. And I'm using that little bit of damage to sort of define the shapes. There we go. It's looking pretty gungy. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, right on. Yep. The dry brushing really worked well.
What do you think of the sword?
The sword. What have you done to the sword? Oh, you put a bit of red on the sword? Yeah.
Ooh.
We're going to put a ton of rust on that sword.
A lot more?
Oh, yeah. Tons more.
Okay.
Tons more. We're going to make that sword look like it was plunged in the belly of a rust monster.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Now, what is next? I'm pretty happy with that, actually. Maybe a little bit of tan on his toes of his boots, just to kind of bring that color back a little bit. Doesn't need much. Okay, we're pretty much there. Now, the next thing we're going to do is so at this point, this is basically a painted mini, right? The next thing you could do would be pick out some details, pick out the details like that little hourglass could be painted. If you could put a pattern on his shield if you wanted, but he's pretty much a finished painted mini, right? But now what we're going to do is we're going to take it to the next level and do a whole bunch of kind of additional coloring on him. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to start by grabbing this Phantom Glow color, and I'm just going to use a straight Phantom Glow color. Don't be scared of it. And I'm going to thin it just a little bit. I don't want a lot on my brush. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start dabbing in this color and kind of the border between light and shadow on this guy. So if we look at his skull, for example, right, the side of his skull towards the light is lighter and the other side is darker. Well, in that zone in between, I'm going to put a few little thin dabs. So just to show you what I'm doing, I'm putting little dots of this color like this. Very hard to see. They're just little bits of it there on my thumb. And what it's doing is it's just adding that color into the mini in a zone between light and shadow. So your eye will pick it up subtly, but it's not going to suddenly take over and dominate the whole model. So we just do it in that transition zone. Try to avoid putting it like right where the light would strike the model. So I'm going to put it on the side of his jaw, but not on the side that I highlighted. It's going on the opposite side. And it's going to add some creepy kind of glowing spectral color in there. But I also want to keep it out of where the darkest shadows should be. Now, part of my plan is at the end I'm going to go back and I'm going to use that dark purple and I'm going to dark line and define all the shapes. So bear in mind that the shapes don't look really well defined right now. They're going to get better defined in the last step. So on top of the red, right in this zone under this cloak, I'm going to highlight the red in the shadows with a little bit of the spectral glow color, just enough to make the shapes visible. Same thing on the belt across his chest. I'm going to highlight the back of it away from the light with the spectral glow color. I'm just going to add some weird, creepy kind of dimensions to him. Same thing under this armpit, that little bit of leather in the shadow. Reach right down deep inside there and do that. Give it a little bit of that creepy color. We need to do that down here along his leg. So not up here where the leg is in highlight, but right down here at the back where there's like little bumps in the cloth that are right in the shadow zone. Just on the edge of the shadow close to the light. I'm just going to highlight them, make the shapes a little bit more visible with this blue-green color. There we go, like that. See, Dave, if you want to look right inside, like right in there along the back of his leg, you can see that?
Ooh,
Okay,
yeah.
and it's not a lot of paint. It's just a tiny little bit of paint at a time, but it really makes the shapes more visible.
Yeah.
And it gives them a creepy look. Yes, dear. Okay. No. If you want to take off, go for it. You leave the dog or take her?
I'll take her. I'll leave you in car keep.
Thank you.
I'll put my stuff in the car. I'll be back in a second. Do this computer?
No, just leave it there. I'll deal with that later. Okay, so let's keep going. So I want to say thanks again, Dave, for agreeing to come and hang out.
Oh, I'm having fun.
It's made it easier for me to kind of, like I say, keep track of what I'm doing, and
I'm having fun, so thanks
Good.
for having me.
good. And of course, thanks to my long-suffering wife, Catherine, who has been monitoring the Twitch channel for us. Oh dear.
I'll be back in a second.
Okay. So here's another spot where I'm going to do this on his hilt of his sword there. I'm going to go underneath the hilt. Put a few little dabs of this color right on the bottom sort of the sword handle, on the leather handle. Put a little bit of daubs of this on the metal as well. And we're going to cover this up with rust. But I want to have this blue color under the metal when I go to do the rust effects. So right on that hilt, I'm going to put some daubs of this blue color. I'm going to do it all along, just dots and daubs and dashes all along the bottom of the blade. And most of this is going to get covered with rust, okay? So this is just to add in this color. In fact, you could even just paint this as a stripe of color if you wanted, because we're going to put the rust effects over it. But I like to try to kind of be consistent with texture. So I'm just dabbing and dashing it on there, because that's what I'm going to do with the rust. See how blue that became?
Ooh, yeah.
And that's where we're headed. We're going to do that in a whole bunch of different spots. We're going to spend like the next 10 minutes putting blue dots all over the Mini. But always in that border zone between shadow and light, not just right out in the open. So if you think about it, like that's the bottom of the sword blade that's got the blue on it, not the top.
Oh, yes, I see.
So it's like a glowing spectral shadow kind of idea. So that's where I've done that all along the sword blade along there. Okay, right in here. Do it on both sides of the sword blade. Back of the hilt. This is a particularly nice bones mini, this one. Like the textures on it are really nice. It's really crisp casting. It's a beautiful sculpt. I've got the pewter one here as well, and what I usually do for these is I paint the metal one because the details are crisper and it shows better on the camera. But this particular one is really nice. I think it's a Bones USA. It's a Dungeon Dwellers, which is the Bones USA stuff that they're making, which is like it's a Cyocast style. It's basically cast plastic as opposed to 3D printed plastic. All right, let's get that in there. Reach right up there in the back into the shadow, edge of the shadows. Put little green dots, blue-green dots on everything. Make the shadows better defined. Okay, so we've done in there, we've done that. Did the back of his bony knees. We're going to do inside the bony knee in there. And this is be his right knee, left from our perspective. We'll put a little bit of that on the bone in his knee as well. Just bear in mind that we're trying to keep the bone shapes separate, right? So you don't just cover the whole bone. Do a little bit on the back of his cloak. The cloak, the leather on the inside of the cloak doesn't need as much of this, I think. It still gets a little bit of it in there. Almost like it's stained by dripping blue-green ecto goo. There we go. So here's a good example of it right on the back of his foot here. The back of the foot is in shadow, so I'm going to essentially highlight the shapes of the foot with little dabs and dashes of this color. There we go. Now the shield, the bottom and the back of the shield, same idea. Little dashes of this color. It needs less on the shield. It shows up really strongly on this red, so it doesn't need as much of this, but we still got to do some. Or you don't have to if you don't like it. Either way.
Okay, the keys are over here for you.
Thank you. See you later on.
Nice to see you, Catherine.
Nice to see you.
Dab and dash it, dot it along the bottom of the shield like maybe it's corrosion or something gross on the shield. The shield boss needs it on the bottom of the shield boss. People were probably wondering, why hasn't he dry brushed silver or highlighted silver on the metallics? We're going to highlight them with rust instead of with anything shiny. That's the plan. Okay. I'm liking it. I'm liking it.
What did you fill the cracks on the shield with? What colors did you use?
Which cracks on the shield?
The streaks and orange.
Oh, I just did that with I took the red and I made a mixture of this red.
Yeah.
Okay. With some of that.
Oh.
And some of that. And then some of this. So essentially I made a light colored gray that includes all of the other colors.
Okay.
So that it's very desaturated, but it contains elements of everything around it. Okay. I'm feeling kind of happy with that. The only thing I'm not really liking is the fact that this color doesn't appear on the cloak anywhere. And I'm not really sure which way to go with it. Now, I think I could dry brush it on there. So I will. I'm going to grab this dry brush. Put oh, that's the wrong brush. Just a tiny bit of this on there. I'm going to mix it, I think, in with the gray. I steal this technique from Rhonda Bender quite happily. So now I'm going to dry brush that mixture of blue. You can't quite see that. There it is. I mixed some of the blue into this. And now I'm going to just dry brush a little of it in the shadow region at the back of the figure. And it's almost like a bit of a backlighting dry brush. So I'm coming not from the light to the shadow, I'm coming from the shadow towards the light in the edge of the shadow. Like I'm not going to go deep in there and really do a lot of dry brushing, or deep in there and do a lot of dry brushing. I want to be in the transition zone. So just in that intermediate zone from the shadow towards the light, just a little bit of that, and that incorporates that blue color in there. Now it's not showing on the screen all that well, but when you see the final photos that'll get posted with the video, you'll be able to see this color really well. Do the same thing on the back of the fur on his leg, and down in here on the back of this leg, I'm going to do that as well. Just a touch of it. There we go. Where else do we need? Oh, the back of this arm. A little bit on the back of that arm. Just a touch. There we go. In between his arm and the shield, we need a little bit of that. I'm pretty happy with that. I like that. It looks very desaturated on the screen, but it's too bad. I wonder what we could do to. I'm going to briefly change the color so you can see the color show up really well on this. Let's change the white balance. You ready? This is going to look freaky, but I'll show you what it looks like. Here we go. Okay, so now you can see the blue starting to show up in there in the shadow. See the blue on the back there?
Yeah.
See, if I leave it like that, it's going to look like me look at the color of my fingers. All right? But in person, that's almost exactly what it looks like in person. Right? Like you see that there?
Yeah, I do.
That's what it looks like on the screen. But the surroundings here are just totally thrown off by the software. You know, I think I'll leave it like that, even though the background looks really, really weird. And hopefully people don't get nauseous from looking at that.
Well, I'm pretty sure they can have a paper bag by them or something.
I often wonder if people feel nauseous just looking at my painting anyway.
No, actually, as a matter of fact, a lot of people will probably try to replicate it.
I hope so. That was the idea behind doing this. I mean, you were in some of the first ones of these classes that we did, right? And it just seemed to make everything easier for people. So that's why we're doing it this way. There we go. I'm just messing around. I shouldn't be doing that. I should be saying what I'm doing and why I'm doing it and be a little bit more clear. All right. Let's turn that off. There we go. Clean the dry brush. Okay. Now we're getting somewhere. So now is the fun bit. So for rust effects, we do light colored rust first, and then we do the dark colored rust on top. The reason we do that is it looks more rusted and pitted. And there's lots of chemical products that'll do this job for you, but we're going to do it the old school dab on the paint with the brush trick. Ooh. Let me see. I like it. I want to see. That looks awesome, dude. It does. Like it looks really good, man. Oh yeah. Little, just not quite so heavy, right? Like you're starting to push the paint into the low spots in there.
Oh, okay.
Just a little lighter, but that's looking really cool. Yeah. I'm digging it.
Thank you.
That's a good looking model, man.
That is a good sculpt. I love the sculpt.
No, I mean your paint job is looking good.
Oh,
I love it. Okay, so rust orange. You don't have rust orange yet.
No, I don't.
So you need to find the sharpest, pointiest brush you can.
Alrighty.
There should be a whole bunch of them in the cup
no,
there.
This
You got a good one? Okay. So there's your rust orange. You can see it's really, really bright there.
Yep.
And the aim here is we're going to try to basically create highlights on the darkened steel with little dots of this really saturated rusty orange. And then we're going to dull down the orange with dots of dark red and purple.
Okay.
This is the plan. So I'm going to start, the easiest place to do this is going to be on the sword blade, on the top of the sword blade.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just going to start by putting little dots of orange. I want to leave some silver showing at the tip where maybe he stabbed somebody with it and the rust got rubbed off.
Mm-hmm.
But then I'm going to work my way further back. Just little tiny dots of orange. All random directions. And slowly build up a little concentration of orange dots. And this is going to make the sword look really, really well defined. But also really, really like weathered and rusted and gross. And that's what I'm looking for. There we go. Starting to bring that shape out. A little bit on the hilt as well. There's like a 3-leafed pattern or a crown pattern on the pommel. I want to kind of highlight that with this orange as well. You can go over the top of the blue with this. And just don't completely cover the blue. Let the blue show through it a little bit. And that's going to give the rust a really creepy sort of looking corroded texture. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. Like a beat up. I mean, that already looks like it's just corroded away to nothing.
Should we put it on the chainmail as well?
We're going to put it on the chainmail. The chainmail is a little bit more difficult because it can just turn all the rings orange.
Yeah.
So you have to be very, very discreet's not really the right word, but sparing. That's what I'm trying to say, sparing.
Okay.
And try to focus like on areas like, so like on his chest, he's almost got like the chest part is kind of sagging outwards.
Yeah.
So where the edge of that curve is, where the light would catch it, and you're going to get a natural shininess of the metal, you want to kind of paint on the bottom edge of that with the rust. So the shape doesn't totally disappear behind rust. So if you look on the screen there now, you can see what I've done. It's like, so there's the curve outwards, and I've painted just underneath it with the rust. And then I'll put a little bit in the center. But if you go too far, the chainmail, like it just disappears. You can do a little bit on his belt buckle. Now the other interesting thing is you can put this on the leather as well, as so like the rust has kind of dripped down and left stains on the leather.
Mm-hmm.
Do it anywhere you like. Just anything which is not actually metal, be very, very sparing with it. Oh, that computer's making funny noises. I'm going to have to go check on it. There we go. It's looking pretty grungy now. Okay, I need to do the back edge of that sword blade as well. Now, people tend to really thin the paint for this. And if you thin it too much, you get too much paint flow. And then it's hard to control the size of your dots. You want little tiny dots. Mm-hmm. So if you do need to improve the flow of the paint, you could use a tiny bit of flow improver so that it doesn't dry out so fast. And when I say tiny, I mean like 3 molecules of it. There's your flow improver right there, okay? But what will happen is if you put too much, it's like painting with a flood. And we really want to go the other way. We almost better to have the paint too dry than too wet.
Yeah.
The same thing when your people are doing sponging. You sponge the dots on. If it's too wet, it just makes big stains, splotches, which you want little tiny dots. So now that's starting to happen right now, right there. Those dots are starting to become bigger because I put that little bit of flow improver in, and it was just a little too much probably. So I want to be really careful and just reduce the size of the dots that I'm making. Backside of this blade, I'm trying to make sure that that blue-green corroded look, that creepy look shows through. There we go. I like it. I mean, if I didn't like it, I would fix it, right? Do something different.
Yes. No, for something completely different.
So now I'm going to do the rim of the shield. So I'm not going to do this part of the shield out here where it would be shiniest. And do it back in behind his shoulder. It would probably get polished by his cloak a bit there, but I'm going to pretend it's not. So I can leave that bit shiny and put a little bit more rust at the bottom. That's just an artistic choice more than anything. Okay, put some on the outside of the rim of the shield. Some at the top of the shield. Oh, put it off screen. There we go. And then on the back, I'm going to put a little tiny bit in a similar zone, top and bottom. Okay, and now the shield boss is going to get this on the top. Not too much. We want this is on the shadow side. We don't want to have too much of it. Just want enough to show that the metal is all kind of weathered.
Mm-hmm.
Now the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put some of this on the shield itself. Almost like maybe little specks of metal got stuck in the cuts in the shield, or who knows. Just adding a little bit of strange, unexpected color. And now just remember, always keep in the back of mind that we're going to be putting a darker color over this.
We are.
Yeah, so it's going to make it look three-dimensional. Every one of these little scrappy dots is going to look 3D when we're done by putting dark pitting in the center of it. Right, it makes each of those dots look like a hole as opposed to a dab of color.
Okay.
And it's going to look really cool. In my opinion, I like doing it that way. Not everybody does.
That was me.
Oh, I was like, I thought Catherine took the dog with her.
Yeah, that
I was like, uh-oh. That was you. Okay. All right. I'm not jumpy. I think you can see what I mean about like going a little bit crazy, sitting here talking to myself, painting by myself.
No, there's nothing wrong with that. The great thing about talking to yourself is you always get the best answers.
Well, exactly. It's great when people always agree with you, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
The problem is when you start disagreeing with yourself as you go. And you get in arguments with yourself and start telling yourself off for being so silly.
Well,
I don't mean you, I mean me,
yeah,
obviously.
Yes, yeah. Well, I know that. But the other thing about talking to yourself, which they never tell you, or even arguing with yourself, that they never tell you, is that you always win.
All right. I've got a little bit of purple on my brush, and I'm just going back, and I'm going to emphasize some of these shots. So like these cuts in the shield. Okay, I'm going to put a little bit of a shadow in each of the cuts on the upper side. So because the light catches the bottom of the cut, and the top of the cut gets shadowed by the light coming over the shield. And that's going to make them all look deeper.
Which one did you use, the nightshade, or did you use
the nightshade? Just a very, very small amount of the thin nightshade. Because anytime we would do something normally with black, yes. On this model we do it with nightshade. This was the plan anyway.
That's the plan.
That's the plan.
Nightshade is beautiful.
It is a great color. I really like it.
The thing is, the sad thing about these colors is I don't have the phantom glow.
I can't get it. It's not that I can't get it. I don't have a place to store it, right? I've been talking to Reaper trying to get a larger paint rack. Yeah. And it's been like they don't have them. They don't have a company that makes them. So I would love to expand the line of Reaper paints that we have in the studio, but I don't have anywhere to store them.
Well I don't know. It looks like I'm going to have to get the... do you have to sell the 3-pack of that?
If you want me to order it in for you, we can absolutely do that. Just like I'm just talking in general. Like those are some of the colors that I would love to be able to just have on the shelf all the time.
Yes.
But I need a rack or something to put them in.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Reaper hasn't had the racks available for a while. Okay, I'm starting to putter too much. Okay, so there we go. There's our undead guy. And now I'm going to use the dark red. You could use the dark purple. The purple's a bit too dark. I'm going to use the dark red. I think I'll put... what am I going to do with it? I'll put it down here. Put just a little bit of nightshade purple into the dark red. Make it a little bit darker. Great color for this is auburn orange. That mahogany red works really well for it. There's so many. What you really just need is a dark orange, and it's going to work. You can pretty much mix black with any orange and get a good color. And the idea here is that I'll do it on the sword first because it shows up the best. Is any of these little dots I'm going to put either one or two little tiny darker dots in the center of them. And that makes them look like pits as opposed to just daubs of color. You could do it with straight black, but I don't think it looks quite as good. Black and brown is a good color for this. I find walnut brown is a little bit too much like black. Doing it with a nightshade. It's just a little too dark, and you still want it to be kind of orangey. But you just experiment with it. There's different colors that will all work for this sort of effect. The key thing is keep the dots as small and practice making the dots as small as possible. This is not just about making a rust effect. This is actually also ideas for how to practice developing your brush control. And by practicing making all these little tiny dots, you improve your precision, you improve your control of the paint flow, and you just overall end up being a better painter. So that's partly what this is about too. So make the dots as small as you can. Try to aim to put the dots inside the other orange dots. And if you think about it, that's what you do when you're painting eyes. You try to put little white reflection dots inside the other dots you painted for eyes. So this is good practice for your brush control for painting good eyes. Always with the ulterior motive, me. Alright, there we go. It's starting to come up. It looks quite crusty and cruddy, which is what I wanted. Do the same thing on the boss here. I'm going to leave the center of the boss lighter colored. I'm going to try to put the darker dots kind of around the periphery, closer to the bottom, and the edges.
Is this the nightshade you're talking about?
Nope, this is a mixture of red with a little bit of nightshade.
Ah, even better.
Yeah. So this is the color right here. You see it? It's very dark, but it's not quite black.
Yes.
You might also find that there's areas that you'd like to have look more kind of gross, so you can make a little bit of a wash with it, and then just splodge on blobs of this color, and when it dries in those horrible coffee stain marks, it creates something which looks a bit like rust staining. So just put little daubs of very thin, of this color very thin on. So this is what I'm doing, just putting on little blobs of it like that. They barely show up in my hand, but when they dry, they make coffee stains. I'll do it again. There's those little blobs. As they dry up, they make coffee stains, and that just makes everything look that much more irregular.
Coffee stains.
Coffee stains. Also, people call them the tide marks. People usually get it like by accident when they put too much water in their paint. They put the paint on too thick, but in this case we're doing it on purpose to get an effect. And that makes it totally legit. Nobody's allowed to complain. Put some of this on the bottom of this blade all the way out here. Put some on the bottom along there as well. Just little tiny daubs of very thin paint. And as it dries, it's going to kind of, like I say, make that look even crustier. Crusty looking old undead guy we got going on here now. So what are we missing on this dude?
I think we're missing a name.
A name? That's probably true. You think he deserves a name?
Yes.
Sir Bone Wrath the Scarred.
Yes.
Bone Wrath the Scarred. I think they already have a guy named that in Reaper, though. Or something very... Sir Wrathbone, that's what they've got. They've got an undead guy named Sir Wrathbone. All the good names are always already taken.
How about Scarbone?
Scarbone. Okay, so the last thing I said I was going to do, we've got a little bit of time left actually. I'm going to use that sepia to make staining on the cloak and on the fur. So this is the sepia, No, that's bone shadow. That's the wrong color. Sepia, best brown liner. We're not using that today. I know I had the sepia here. Oh, it's right in front of me. Sepia wash, 9310. Sepia wash. I'm going to shake it up really good. Get a little bit of it on the palette. Doesn't need very much of that. Give you a bit of that on there. Put it over in the corner here.
Thank you.
Don't need much of this. It has quite a strong effect. So what we're going to do, we're going to take a little bit of that. I'm going to move it off to the side here, and I'm going to add a little bit of water to it. Oh. Just try to thin it out and get a sense of how it's going to work. And then I'm going to do it on my thumb as usual.
Yes, good idea.
Give it a test. Okay, so it's very thin. It doesn't have a huge color effect, which is good. So I'll use just a little bit of it, and we'll test and see what we get. So what I'm looking at is this zone at the bottom of the cloak in here.
Okay.
And I'm going to sort of run this along the edges of things where water might gather, where it might brush up on things. And I'm basically just kind of dabbing it on and then pulling downwards towards the shadow. And it's just adding a little bit more color variety
And depth. Okay.
and depth of color, yeah. I'm going to put on the boots for sure, a little bit of that. Now the other thing I'm going to do with this is going to go on the base so that it's going to look a bit like the colors that are like caught on his clothing and on his equipment come from the environment around him, which means the base. So like on the squares in the base here, I'm just going to put blobs of this sepia.
Good idea.
And this is something that Aaron Lovejoy taught me, how to kind of tie the environment to the model. So I'm not putting this everywhere. I'm just making it irregular on the base. And what I'm going to do later is one of the last steps is going to be to do a little bit of light color dry brushing and picking out the edges of the stones to make the base look as though it's lit by the same light source as the rest of them. Because right now the base is quite a bit darker. The other place you can do this is on the leather. Remember we were talking about like the shield might be a bit leathery. So I can put some blobs of this on the shield to make the shield look a little bit more patchy. And it's going to add a little bit more color variety where it dries. I can put some of this on the bottom of the cloak where it would drag on the ground. What I'm not going to do at this particular stage is just do a wholesale wash of this over the whole cloak. That's not what I'm looking for from this color. I'm just trying to get the ground color to faintly show up on the fur where the fur would drag on the ground.
That's actually a good idea. I like that very much.
That Aaron Lovejoy is a smart guy. Not that he's, kind of at the company that's hosting us.
But he knows what he's talking about.
He does. I've learned a lot from Aaron over the years. I'm going to put some on the bottom of the sword. I'm just kind of using it to gunge things up even further. Gungy old dude we want. Okay, I think that's probably enough on the base.
I'm going to do a dry brush for me of that color on the base.
So we had our stone gray, right, which was down here. So what you could do is add maybe a bit of the aged bone into the stone gray.
Okay.
Just to make it a little bit lighter. And there's two ways to do this. One of the ways I like to do it is same as we've just been doing like the rust effect. I'll do that on the edges of stones. So like these stones right here, okay, at the front, the light's coming from that direction. So I'll just kind of pick out the center and edge of those stone blocks, the slightly lighter color of the stone. So it makes the shadows look more dramatic on the base. And you can do this with dry brushing as well. Just with dry brushing, it's not quite as precise. So it's harder to sort of choose exactly where you want the light to catch when you do it with dry brushing. But dry brushing works too. Just you get a slightly different result. Just looking for where the edge. And the other thing is you want to be sure, because this is like a dungeon lit setting, right? This is not like out in the grassy plains or anything like that. That you get a variance from the light side to the dark side, so that it's not just like uniform lighting. Right on. All right, I'm pretty happy with that. I mean, he could be better defined. We could go back in and define some of the individual shapes a little bit better by blacklining. So why don't we do a little bit of that? I'm going to grab my purple. And where should I put the purple? I'll just put it down here by this red. I'm going to put some of my flow improver into that purple.
Mm-hmm.
I can put a bit of the sepia in there as well. That'll have like a kind of a grotty effect on it, but it's still going to be a very dark color. And I don't know if you can see that on the screen right there, but see, as I move that, it moves on its own after I'm done with it. So it's just kind of running around, and that's what I want for this effect. I want to be able to do very, very thin lines with the purple, and the flow improver and the effect of that ink are going to do something similar. So now with my sharp brush tip, I'm going to go and start picking out anywhere that two surfaces meet. So like where this hilt meets the blade, I'm going to re-emphasize that dark line. Where the hand meets the sword hilt, there's the pommel nut and the pommel, they get separated by a black line. Now I know you've done black lining before. It does take a lot of practice, but it's practice worth doing to kind of improve the contrast in the model. So where the chainmail right in there meets up against the cloak, we want to redefine that line. So I'll paint that line in darker with his color.
Is that the one where you mix with the deep red and also the nightshade?
Yep. Okay. Just a very, very dark color. And essentially what I'm doing is anywhere two surfaces meet, I'm making the shadow deeper to kind of just to increase the separation of materials and the contrast is all I'm doing. So just look for anywhere like the edge of a belt, the edge of a buckle, anywhere that two shapes meet, we add a dark line in. And that'll help increase the definition of the model. Now normally when I paint, I will also increase the highlighting. I'll go back and just really ramp up the contrast. We're bringing the highlighting way up again. But I don't really have enough time to do that today. So yeah, dark lining is basically outlining every shape with a dark shadow. Every shape gets a dark shadow. And it's a bit more advanced, but it's worth doing it, and it's worth practicing it very early on in your painting journey, as it were. Just increase the definition at every step. The camera doesn't pick it up all the well, but this model is, like the shield, for example, now looks a lot less flat than it did. It looks like it's got a lot more variance in shape, and most of that has been faked with paint. All right, let's put it back a bit closer to the normal color. Where's my... Yeah, I turn the camera on and it just goes nuts. There we go. White balance is back to normal. Resolution is good. I shall crank the resolution right up for just a moment so you can see it like super sharp. Give it a moment. As soon as you turn the resolution right up, the software kind of loses its mind and slows right down. There we go. Very dark colored model. Lots of details picked out. He looks very grungy. He's gonna look good on somebody's D&D table as a villain of some kind. I'm quite happy with that. I'm gonna cover over that arrow that I painted now. There he is, done. Or at least done enough. He's done enough to make me happy. You can always go further, always do more refinement. Like we could do this little hourglass. We could make this little hourglass glow. There's all kinds of stuff you can do. But I think that's enough for this guy. You could also, if you feel like the light side, the shadow side is not dark enough, you can go in and glaze in more of the purple to darken it up. But I'm feeling pretty happy with that side of things. Yeah, there he is. All right, and I'm going to go grab the other two and put all three of them side by side. Record that. There's the three of them. Enough to make your players weep with fear. That's what it's all about, right?
Right. That's definitely or dread.
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
Slow and
Blah. Okay.